And it's time once again to talk Houston Texans football. And when we talk Houston Texans football, we turn our attention to Fan Nation and Mr. Cole Thompson. How's it going, Cole?
Yeah, Greg, it's been a busy couple of weeks. It was a busy time leading up to the draft, trying to figure out what the hell the Texans were going to do at pick number 2. And then they ended up doing what we thought they were going to do at pick number 3. After they do what we didn't expect them to do at pick number 2. So, you know what? It's been a bustling, busy time up here, but it's an exciting time. I think that's the best word to describe what's been going on down in the 713 loop.
We did our draft recap of every team. Dave Syvertson, lead scout from our lads, a couple weeks ago. And there was only one team that we had completely different, I'm going to say grades because we don't grade, but completely different analysis of how we felt the team did in the draft. Completely different. And so you can break the tie. And by the way, if you want to listen to our debate, which went on for about 4 minutes, you can check it out on the channel for you Houston Texans fans who might not have seen that yet. So that's on the channel. We'll have it in the description area. I thought they had an excellent draft based on the fact that they got 2 potentially superstar players. Dave took the stand of they traded way too much capital. They just overtraded. It just was ridiculous the way that they made those trades in order to pick up that capital, that collateral, and that was his stance. So how did you feel? What was your opinion? And don't tell me you were down the middle, because I know after the way I talked to you before we went on the air, I doubt that's the case. So give me your opinion on how the Texans did.
It's not that I'm down the middle. I don't think that's fair. I think that what it is you don't have a right answer right now.
Of course.
But I will say, I appreciate the aggressiveness of what Nick Caserio did. Listen, there's 2 ways that you can go ahead about being a GM. The first is you can play it safe. You can take the cool, calm, collective way and hope for the best, expect the worst, and then hope that you stay employed for the next 5 to 7 years. Or you swing and miss. Now you have 2 strikes against you, and you better go out swinging big, which is something that Nick Caserio said he wanted to do at his introductory press conference after the Lovie Smith fire. Said, if I'm going to be down this team, at least I'm going down swinging. Go down swinging. Yeah. And I had brought this up on a couple podcasts before, that if they were going to make a trade up, if they were going to do anything possible to go ahead and land their guy, go trade up for Will Anderson. Because the reality sets in that you need pass rushing help, specifically after this year. You're an organization that finished bottom 5 last year against the run. You were bottom 5 against in missed tackle rate. You were bottom 5 in yards after contact, and you were bottom 10 in pressures. Now, the sack total was fine, but the pressure rate was horrendous. And you have Jerry Hughes, who is beating father time at age 34, going into a contract year. Yes. And you have Jonathan Grenard, who's going into a contract year. And when he's healthy, is really good, but he missed about 9 games last year, and that amply hurt his production, which ultimately made the Texans have to pivot toward looking at a defensive lineman. And if you don't believe in the same type of defensive lineman coming out next year, and you know you need a player, and you cannot sell your fan base, because picture this for a second. Put yourself in the shoes of a Texans fan. Hey, we're going to add in a premier defensive player. We're going to add in an elite player who comes from Alabama, is born and bred in the same type of culture as D'Amico Ryans. Remember when D'Amico Ryans was a superstar for us? Yeah, we got that guy now. We got that guy back in the building. Same offense that averaged 16 points per game, and that was on a good day. Yeah, we're running that back out there. Say hi to us, fans. Sell that to a fan base. Sell that to a fan base. You can. They will boo you. They will berate you. They will literally go eat you alive.
Absolutely.
The second that you caught down. So you go get your quarterback of the future. And the way that I describe this to people, and the way that I've tried to describe this as best as possible, there's 2 ways this looks like a win. The first is Houston wins a lot of games. Houston gets 2 premier players, and they end up going from being about a 3-win team to about an 8-win team. And it's very plausible.
Sure.
It's very plausible that it's hot at the right time.
In that division, too, yeah.
In that division, 8 wins is very plausible. Or, and this is the thing that I think is more plausible, C.J. Stroud looks like Offensive Rookie of the Year. He sets the new franchise record in total rookie touchdowns and in total rookie passing yards. he leads the team to several big wins in division. And then you go from about it being a 3-win team to maybe a 6-win team. And Will Anderson wins Defensive Rookie of the Year. And he's a guy that gets about double-digit sacks, or 8.5 sacks and 12.5 tackles. Well, if you know for a fact that these are two guys that are meeting the criteria year one, would you take a loss here or there to see them get better over time? Or would you rather have 8 wins this year and then maybe see a regression set in year 2 like it's Chase Young, or a regression set in year 2 like a Zach Wilson? Would you rather see that? Because I feel like if you get two guys that show they're on the come up and you get 6 wins, and you think that potentially Cleveland gets about 6 wins, and you're in that same window, and 6 wins maybe gets you at about pick number 8 or pick number 9, which goes to Arizona, and Cleveland gets about 7 wins, so now you're at pick number 11 if you're in the same spot, and you lead at 2 premier players, and you don't like any of the guys in this year's draft or next year's draft for per se at pass rusher. You landed your premier pass rusher, still have your first-round pick, still have a second-round pick, still have a third-round pick in next year's draft, and you landed 2 premier prospects. So it's hard to say this is a lose situation. It's not a win. And I understand there's going to be a lot of people out there that go, well, how can you call us a win when they gave up all this draft capital? Because if the Texans find 2 premier cornerstones at all the primary positions.
That's the big if. Yep.
You got it right.
Yep.
You got it right.
Yes.
That's all that matters.
That's it.
And
that's all that matters. That's what I said. I said if those 2 guys are Hall of Fame type caliber players, doesn't matter what the rest of the draft looks like. Matter of fact, I could say the same thing about any team. If it was just C.J. Stroud, if you land a Hall of Fame player in a draft, great draft.
I think so. It's not even about, for me, a Hall of Fame player. If you land a player that will transcend your team for the next, let's just go for 6 years, 7 years, and you see ample production get better, and you go from being the bottom dwellers of your conference, not division, just conference, and you're now a playoff contending team every single year, and maybe you make it to a couple of AFC championship games, maybe a Super Bowl. Well, they've done their job.
Yep.
Because if you can't ask players in today's game with the violence and the level of impact of hits and the size and the frames and all that, you can't ask players to now guarantee you 10, 12 years of football.
Sure.
But if they give you 7 or 8 really strong years, and they're building blocks for a team that really doesn't have building blocks, that's the other thing. They don't have a lot of building blocks right now. Why not go ahead and take that risk? Why not go ahead and make that move?
Absolutely.
And the bigger thing is that if you also are picking, and Nick Caserio has to understand this as well, and this is where I think fans kind of don't get this, and where the national spotlight 100% doesn't get this. If Nick Caserio does not make that trade, and Houston is sitting where they are next season, same spot, they're picking at number 2, they're picking at number 3. You're not making that pick.
That's true. He won't be there.
You're not making that pick.
Yeah.
The next GM is making that pick. And that next GM that's making that pick may think otherwise than you. Or, and here's the worst one, here's an even worse scenario. You go ahead and you add in Will Anderson, and then Davis Mills looks the part and he gets you 6 wins, and you do make that pick, but there is no Caleb Williams available for you. There is no Drake May available for you, and you're stuck with another year of trying to figure out what the hell Davis Mills is.
Yeah.
So, damned if you do, damned if you don't if you're the Texans.
Sure.
There's never going to be people who are happy about it, and I hate the national narrative on this because of the national people, and as somebody that works in national radio, I feel like I'm the only person that's going to defend Houston here. It's a risk, and it's going to be 100% a risk, no matter what. But it's a risk that Nick Caserio had to make to save his job. Because if he doesn't make this risk, and the Texans are in the same spot next year, he is no longer employed. If they don't make that risk, and the Texans are even better than what they were next year, then the Texans are in a very crappy situation because they know that there's 2 quarterbacks that could absolutely be transcendent.
Yes.
And they would have to trade up
and use up all that. Yeah, they'd have to use up all the picks they just traded this draft in next year's draft.
Next year's draft.
So it'd be gone anyway. Yeah.
It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So that's the way I look at it.
So you're telling me, because I haven't looked at it, so you're telling me there was a lot more of the national media that thought the way Dave did.
Oh yeah.
Okay. I wasn't aware of that. Okay.
And and again, as somebody that works on the national side with a lot of things, I understand the prerequisite for it. I completely understand. They gave out too much, and it's like, oh well, they gave out too much. Come on, man, they gave out way too much. You got to give out way too much. Yeah. Like I get all that, but at the same time, what do you expect them to do? Explain to me, as a Texans fan, somebody who really put yourself in the shoes of a Texans fan, somebody that looks at Texans fans, put yourself in that shoe. Explain to me how you can pass on a talent like Will Anderson when everyone knows that you're going to go take Will Anderson.
Yeah.
Everyone knows you're going to take Will Anderson. Everyone knows it's Will Anderson. But explain to me how you can walk out of a draft without a quarterback.
Yeah.
And a quarterback that you truly believe in. Not a quarterback that you maybe have some hopes in.
That would have been Will Levis. Yes. That would have been, or Hendon Hooker. That's what it would have been. Yeah.
And I can tell you that they met with Hendon Hooker and they really liked Hendon Hooker and they believed that Hendon Hooker had all the capabilities and the mechanics to be a very stable quarterback in the NFL. And I do too. I believe a lot of that. Yeah. And I believe everything he says is right. But he's going to be a 26-year-old second-year player making his first start next year because if he's going to probably redshirt this year.
Yep.
So sell a fan base on that.
Oh, yeah.
Sell
exactly.
A fan base on that.
Yeah.
And then also, what happens when you do have this opportunity to potentially
draft another guy next year? Yeah.
Draft another guy next year.
You're going to do it.
So you just wasted a pick on a quarterback that was never going to play for you.
Yep. Hey.
We're in Detroit. If he doesn't play this year.
Oh, it's perfect for them.
At the very end.
Yes.
Well, Jared Goff goes into a contract year. You can opt out of it. Yep. You don't have to worry about it. And you can go ahead and give Hendon Hooker a shot.
That's it. Yeah.
Where
perfect
you're not
match.
doing that.
Yep. Not for Houston. So, hey, that's awesome. I'm glad you're seeing things my way, or at least understanding where I'm coming from. And I'm sure that you're the right man for the job covering this team. I do want to ask you whether or not if they had lost that game 17 or whatever it was, game 18.
Week 18.
If they had lost that game, who would have been their quarterback choice?
Based off my conversations, it would have been Bryce Young.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that they would not have gone fully invested in looking to C.J. Stroud. I think that Stroud made himself a lot of money from the very last game of his career, a game that he said was not the closing chapter of his story in college, but I know this was really prominent. It wasn't the closing story. It wasn't the closing chapter of his story in college, but it was the first page of the next day of his career going into the NFL. I thought that was a very prominent quote and very mature way to say this is only the get-go of where I can be. And his game against Georgia is about as flawless as you can look for if you're looking for in terms of a pocket awareness quarterback with a little bit of mobility. He absolutely made money during the day at the Combine. Everyone that I spoke to up there just said this is a kid who is doing everything right, the P's and the Q's, dotting the I's, crossing the T's, has everything that you're looking for in a passer. And then he shredded his stuff at the Pro Day. I mean, everyone said that what he did at the Pro Day was just as prominent as what he did in Indianapolis. Yep. So it's not to say that they wouldn't have gone after a CJ Stroud.
Oh, yeah, I understand.
They very well could have. But everything that they love about Bryce Young fits what Bobby Slowick wants to do. Clean, consistent, pocket awareness, driving the ball across the middle of the field, working more so on completions over highlight throws, very much putting money in the breadbasket, trying to move the sticks. That's what Bobby Slowick is going to try to do here in Houston. He is going to try to make this offense as team-friendly as possible because that's what the Kyle Shanahan offense is. And the biggest thing is that everyone knows this. If you try to duplicate what the Shanahans do, you get fired. It's just like doing the Patriot. It's just like doing the Patriot way. Yeah. So the Shanahan offense has only worked for two people in life. It's worked for Kyle Shanahan and it's worked for Mike Shanahan. Yeah. That's it. Gary Kubiak is probably the closest guy who could take that playbook and nearly hone it into his own. But even then, he adds a couple of tidbits and pro quos and personnel looks that were a little bit different. And Mike McDaniel's doing that right now. So Bobby Slowick's going to do the exact same thing. He's going to switch up some things that will make his offensive play system a little bit more unique than what the Shanahans did. But it still is going to be very Shanahan-based. So Bryce Young fit all that criteria. And C.J. Stroud does fit that criteria outside of about two areas. Number one is the footwork, which I don't think is going to be that big of a problem. And number two is working the middle of the field. He really liked throwing to the outside numbers. He really enjoyed working towards the perimeter and the boundary, not across the middle of the field. If he gets better at that, it'll be an easy transition. But besides that, both these quarterbacks really fit what Bobby Slowick wanted to do. Bryce Young seemed a little bit more honed in to the style of offense that they want to run, to where it would be an immediate upgrade if he was available at pick number one.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up what he needs to do to get better at throwing into traffic, throwing down the middle of the field, because we're going to start with the wide receivers in this draft. And one of them, not the early pick, but the 6th round pick, was one of my favorite picks of the draft as well. This is another reason I like the draft, because not just of what they did at the top, but a few of the other players they added, including Hutchinson in the 6th round. Our lads believed he's a 3rd round quality player. And the kid loves to go into traffic, that type of perfect player you're talking about. And then Tank Dell, who I actually thought going in was a perfect fit for Houston, and they went ahead and took him in round 3. Dell could have been a 2nd round pick. I don't want to hear any comparisons to Tutu Atwell because they're completely different players. And what I also want to throw in there as we start talking about these players is I noticed going through a lot of these draft profiles that most of the players that they drafted were tough kids, and they were all hardworking type players. Tough, hardworking.
All except for one was a team captain their senior year. And we asked Nick Caserio about that. And he said that was something that he really coveted in a player.
Yep.
For a rebuilding franchise, somebody who could act like a leader and be more than willing to not just take the lumps and bruises, but also be willing to admit fault as a team. Every single pick, except for one, and I'm blanking on who was the one, but every single pick was a captain their senior year. I think it was Dylan Horton from TCU was not a captain, but he may have even been a captain. But Jerry Patterson was a captain, Xavier Hutchinson was a captain, Drew Scruggs was a captain. That was a trait that Nick Caserio really coveted in his players that he wanted this year. It was like last year when he went after a lot of Texas-based products and a lot of SEC kids. Like this year's actual draft class was all about captains.
Well, again, another reason I probably liked it. So talk about those receivers and how they're going to impact that room, especially for a young quarterback.
Xavier Hutchinson might be the best wide receiver on the roster when all this is said and done. And that's not me going and blowing smoke up his keister. That's not me just saying,
Sure.
I agree with you that he was a 3rd round pick that fell all the way to 205. Yeah. It's just a lot of things that receivers do in the NFL. A guy like Xavier Hutchinson does pretty well. Mm-hmm. He's a good route runner. He's not a great route runner, but he is a good route runner. He's got very strong hands. He does not drop a lot of balls. He is great in traffic. A guy that I think that you could compare him to in terms of like Kirkland brand style is Cedric Tillman. Cedric Tillman was a guy that was phenomenal weaving through traffic and making contested catches across the middle of the field. And he was physically strong as all hell. That's kind of what you're getting with Xavier Hutchinson at the Big 12 level. And I did a podcast not too long ago with a guy that does Big 12 coverage. And he mentioned that, when you look at a guy like Xavier Hutchinson, he's a player that certainly has made a name for himself of weaving through traffic. And I go, you turn on the tape, every other week he's getting 10 receptions for 122 yards, 2 touchdown passes, regardless of the quarterback against Big 12 play.
Yeah.
And it's not just like, oh, he's beating up on Kansas or he's beating up on Iowa State because he plays for Iowa State. He's beating up on Texas. Yeah. He's beating up on Oklahoma. He is kicking Oklahoma State's ass every single opportunity. And he did it for 3 straight years. Did it in 2020 when Iowa State had the phenomenal year when they went to the Fiesta Bowl. He did it in 2021 when it was Brock Purdy's last year and it was really a down, souring season. And did it last year when they were 3-9, but he was the driving force. He was one of the few offensive promises with the departure of guys like Breece Hall and guys like Charlie Kohler and guys like Chase Allen. He was the offense. He was a lot of the good things. So there's going to be a home for him on special teams for sure. I think that I won't be shocked if by the season's end he's maybe gotten into the lineup as wide receiver number 3 with wide receiver number 2 upside. I love the pick. I thought it was a home run selection. I thought that the value itself was absolutely incredible. Yep. He's going to be coming in, and I think he's going to have an immediate home somewhere. Houston's in a spot where the wide receiver play isn't great. It's maybe a little bit better than last year, but it's not much. I mean, you're getting John Mechie back as of right now, hopefully for the start of the year. Robert Woods is a good type of receiver for what Bobby Slowik's offense likes, which is blocking downfield, physical awareness across the middle of the field. Okay. He's good at that. Noah Brown was added for this offense. Literally, he was added because of he does everything that San Francisco wanted in this offense. Like, that's why Noah Brown's here. Okay. So any other offense that he would go to, he probably wouldn't be that good of a receiver. In this offense, he's going to be really, really special if they utilize him properly. And you still have Nico Collins. But none of those receivers strike fear in you. So that's a good sign if you're a guy like an Xavier Hutchinson or you're a guy like a Tank Dell to come in right away and make an immediate impact in some capacity.
Yes.
And I won't be shocked if both these guys do. For Tank, the size worries me, man. And I'm not gonna say he's Tutu Atwell because if he's not, but the size worries me. He's 5'8", he's $165. They're gonna have to bulk him up if he wants to be more than just a slot receiver and a kick returner. But everyone wants to talk about that 4.5 40 time. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's really cool. Turn on the film. He plays much faster. His play speed is wickedly talented. I'm floored being able to watch it. He moves like butter through space. He's got good hands. He led college football the last 2 years in touchdown receptions. He finished with number 1 this past year in receiving yards. He was top 10 in receiving yards last year with Clayton Tune as his quarterback. And he averaged roughly about 13 yards per play, but he also was really good after the catch. Like, there was a lot of times where those 13 yards would actually be like 33 yards down the field.
Yeah.
So what that means is he's getting a lot of short routes and not being able to do a lot in coverage, in the open field, or he's just burning you. So there's some route tree nuances that I really do like. I think he's a full-fledged receiver and what he brings elementally to your table. I think that he can be a guy that comes in right away and ends up being one of the highly targeted players. I think that if he builds a relationship with C.J. Stroud from rookie minicamp to OTAs, there's going to be a massive expectation for him to burst onto the field. And I think that Caserio did his homework and did a lot of different work, outside of just meeting with him in Houston at the local pro day, because of you're drafting a 5'8" wide receiver to come in and be your immediate replacement for Brandon Cooks. And I'm not saying Brandon Cooks is big. Brandon Cooks is about 5'10".
That's true.
But
yeah.
But the size and the physicality is something that Brandon Cooks had. If you can get that physicality up without losing that speed, it won't shock me if by default this year he is your number 1 receiver. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have to go target the number 1 receiver next year, primarily when you look at guys who are going to become free agents next year. But if he is your number 1 and he ends up getting C.J. Stroud to really build and hone in on his craft and work on these little nuances, I mean, I consider that a win. I think that, that gives you a building block to work with moving forward. And again, this is not a knock on John Mechie, and this is not a knock on Nico Collins, but you can't expect anything from them anymore. You can hope for it, but you can't expect anything from them.
I hear you.
This is now Tank Dell's opportunity to go ahead and take over as wide receiver 1. And everyone else that does good work afterwards, that's a bonus plus. That's an added element to the team.
And like you said, the rookies in the same class, they tend to stick together. And so that's you're going to see that definitely be a part of it as well. All right, so let's talk about the strange situation that a lot of people thought about with that second round pick. So Juice Scruggs, who, by the way, in our lads, actually, if you look at it, they had both Patterson, the 6th round pick, and Scruggs, the 2nd round pick, pretty close together. Matter of fact, Patterson was graded a little higher than Scruggs, so Houston gets them both. But not only did they take Scruggs early, but they trade 2 additional picks, including the pick that they had in that round, to Philadelphia. So they get
pick in the 3rd round.
Pick in the 3rd round. Excuse me. So they trade 65, 188, 230 for the 2nd rounder. What did you think, first of all, when you heard the trade going down? Did you immediately think of a specific player in mind or position?
I thought wide receiver. Okay. For sure. I did potentially think center. I thought Luke Weipler from Ohio State was going to be very much in play, mainly because of you want that correlation between center and quarterback.
That's a good point.
People don't understand how valuable the center position is. Yep. I would argue it's probably the 2nd most important offensive line position. It's left tackle, and then I would go with center, because the center has to pick up on all the key audibles that are being called by the defense, number 1. And number 2, he has to have a good rapport with the quarterback. So for Luke Weipler to potentially be the guy after the relationship he had with C.J. Stroud in college, that made a lot of sense. And I had a 3rd round grade on him. And I thought after Joe Tripman from Wisconsin went and after John Michael Schmitz from Minnesota went, that was probably your next center.
Yes.
But I thought wide receiver. I had heard that they really liked 3 different receivers in this class. Okay. especially around that range.
Okay.
Marvin Mims from Oklahoma was one. Tank Dell from Houston was another. And I had heard that they also did their homework on Jalen Hyatt from Tennessee.
Okay.
And all three were guys that they very much were targeting. They ended up getting Tank Dell at the end of the day. But Mims won a pick later. And I thought Mims was going to be the selection personally. But it didn't shock me that they went interior offensive line. The center position was the biggest weak point for this team the entire year.
Yes.
They had been in conversations with multiple centers throughout free agency. They weren't able to get a deal done with any of them. So they were going back into this year with Scott Quessenberry. And I believe it would be Michael Dieter, who has reps at center, but he's more so a primary guard. That was who you were going into the season with at center.
Yeah.
So they were walking out with at least one center in this draft. And it ended up being Drew Scruggs. And I will be completely real with you. I've watched a lot of Scruggs film because I do a lot of Big Ten coverage. And, Penn State's one of these programs that is so hard to talk about because of it doesn't feel like a lost year when they go 10-2 because 10-2 is a phenomenal year. You still finish top 10.
Yeah.
But look at the talent that goes through there, and you're like, how are you only 10-2? How are you not able to beat up on those two teams? And we all know which two we're talking about.
Yeah,
it's Ohio State and Michigan.
Uh-huh.
But it's like, how are you not able to get there? So I watched a lot of Drew Scruggs film. It was a reach of a pick. I mean, I can't deny that based off of my film watching and based off people that I spoke to, it was a reach of a pick. However, if there is one offense that I want to see Drew Scruggs in, it was San Francisco's or it was Miami's.
Okay.
So I do think he is a good fit for what Houston wants, which is good. And again, if he ends up playing as a Pro Bowl level 2 or 3 years down the line, who gives a crap of where your pre-draft ranking was? As long as you fit the criteria, then that's all you care about.
And then, of course, picking up Patterson in round 6, I thought was really a nice bonus because, like I said, they were really graded pretty similar. And it's almost like a nice insurance policy kind of deal. But Patterson, just like Hutchinson, the other 6th-round pick, both kind of like blue-collar types. We talked about, picking these tough, hardworking players, and Patterson's one of them. So he may not have maybe some of the other skill sets, especially maybe some of the strength that Scruggs has. But, he had a very successful college career for Notre Dame, and I like the pickup late, especially to add some depth along their interior of the line.
What I like about it more so than anything else is the fact of it's a guy who is versatile. He played both center and both guard positions. So massive win right there because if you need versatility into your offensive line. He's a captain, which is going to really bode well for this organization when it comes to leadership aspects. And he was really good at run blocking. And the rushing attack is something that is going to be a precedent and a very big staple of the offense for Houston because of, again, you look at the way that they did things out in San Francisco. You look at the way they were trying to do things out in Miami. Short to intermediate throws, established run game. And now you have two great running backs or two running backs that really counteract each other well in Devin Singletary and Dameon Pierce in your backfield. So because you have that, you feel good about where your run game is, where your rushing attack is. And that is something that I think you need to look at when it comes to benefiting an offense. Having a guy like Jared Patterson who can play a variety of positions. He's a little bit younger as well compared to a Michael Dieter. He basically comes in and replaces Justin McCray in terms of that versatility offensive lineman.
Okay.
And he'll be a guy that will likely see reps with the second team at one position, the third team at another position. And I won't be shocked to see him even fight for starting reps. Again, Kenyon Green is a guy that, they hope is going to pan out and be a long-term option opposite of Shaq Mason. But if he's not, that's why you go and you add in a Jared Patterson to go ahead and say, hey, we're going to push the limits here, kid.
Yep.
This is a new regime as well. So Nick Caserio may have drafted you, but we didn't as an offensive line group. We did not like you as an offensive lineman. So best of luck to you. Hope that you pan out. But if not, we have a guy waiting in the wings. I think that's really important for an organization, especially when you now realize that if you do sign Titus Howard to an extension, every single one of your offensive linemen, including if it is Jared Patterson, is signed through 2025. That is 3 years of full-fledged development and cohesiveness for a quarterback like C.J. Stroud to work with.
No, good point on Green there, because not just insurance for Scruggs, but insurance for Green as well. All right, and then let's talk about those other two defensive players that were drafted right around the middle rounds, Horton and Toto from Alabama, another Alabama kid. First of all, we know Toto doesn't have, or at least we don't think he's going to be D'Amico Ryan's version of Fred Warner. But how does he fit in? And same thing for Dylan Horton.
Toa I actually think is going to be more so the Dre Greenlaw. And the reason I say that is because of when you look at what Fred Warner does, he's good against the run, but he's willing to play in pass coverage, and you need a space linebacker. And you have the thumper in Dre Greenlaw. The space linebacker for Houston hopefully will be Christian Harris, the third-round pick out of Alabama last year. And I think that having that cohesiveness of working alongside Toa is going to be very beneficial for a guy like Christian Harris. Now, the good news is that he's going to be a special teamer very early on. They brought in Denzel Perriman from the Las Vegas Raiders, and 2 years ago, Perriman had a Renaissance revival type season where he lit up the stat sheet. He had the most NFL, he had the most tackles in the NFL. He was a Pro Bowler, and he was a thumper, and he kind of fit what you're looking for in run support. So you add in that guy, and now you allow Toa to build off of his rookie season. You allow him to carve out a niche type of role. But I do think that where he is really good is he has a high IQ, high volume. He's great against the run. And I've talked to some people in Alabama just how much they love running defensive concepts up there. Regardless of who's the defense coordinator, and this has been a massive staple for years, regardless of who it is, they allow Nick to kind of control that stuff. They allow Nick to kind of have final say. It's why, like, it's like when you see every new defensive coordinator come in, they may be from a 3-4 defense, they may be from a 4-3 defense, they may run a lot of zone base, they may run a lot of nickel. Nick has a staple defense. It's a lot of zone, it's a lot of nickel, it's a lot of nickel units, and it's a lot of 3-4. And that does not change. So Nick has final say on that defense, and he is very intricate in design blitzes, in certain formations, in cut-ups, in cutbacks, in delayed blitzes, and stunts. And you have to be able to control that defense. And Henry To'oTo'o had the green dot in the helmet for 2 years.
Okay.
He was the leader. He was the play caller. He was the general. So to get that guy, and to get a guy that is very well equipped with this style of defense is huge for the Texans if he ends up panning out. Dylan Horton's another guy that is very interchangeable. I would expect him to be kind of like your rotational defensive lineman that can kind of do a little bit of both interior and exterior work. Like, I actually asked D'Amico Ryans about this. How do you plan on using Will Anderson? Because when Will played at Alabama, they lined him up when he was on the defensive line as a 4-eye technique. So he played nearly head-on on the offensive tackle, nearly every single rep. They're going to play him on the outside. He's going to be a 5 technique. Where Horton did a little bit of both. He was a 7 technique at times. He was a wide 9 at times. He played a 5 technique. He shifted inside to a 4. And I think that they're going to utilize him that way. If they're going to be a run-heavy formation and they think that he's better against the run, he's going to be on run-heavy plays. Maybe it's kicking out Jerry Hughes, or maybe they'll take out a Sheldon Rankins and they'll move him inside and they'll have him be the delayed blitzer. If they're looking for third down stops, that's kind of where he's going to be. He's a guy that just plays all across the defensive line except for nose and 3 tech, to where he will have a carved niche role for that capacity in some way.
Okay. Yeah, because you mentioned inside there, that was actually the one, and that's a question I wanted to ask you too, is if, like, what else do they have to look at and proving? Like, and also what is maybe their weakness or their issue going into this season based on how the depth chart is panned out this offseason? Because I think that still that interior, getting younger in the middle of the defensive line, is still something that they need to do. They didn't really accomplish that this offseason. But what about you?
I mean, defensive line's going to be one I would have to go with. Wide receivers one, but I mean, wide receivers challenging, man. Like, okay, so there's a reporter and I that are on the beat, and we both floated this idea out. And it's the only idea that would work if you want to upgrade at wide receiver. Do you trade your first-round pick next year, or Cleveland's first-round pick next year, to the Cincinnati Bengals for T. Higgins, and then sign him to a massive extension this year?
Okay.
That way you're guaranteed to have your wide receiver one for the future.
Sure.
And if you don't believe that, because Brandon Ayuk is going to not be available, I don't think. And I thought Brandon Ayuk was actually the target that you should have gone after, but I don't think Brandon Ayuk is going to be available. But if neither of those guys are available for you, and then you're not going to a bidding war when it comes to free agency next year, then you're kind of just stuck at wide receiver for a season. And the good news is there's some wide receivers coming out next year that are very talented. Romeo Odunze from Washington is a kid that I don't hear anybody talking about. That is a kid that belongs in the Fred Biletnikoff Award with also, Emeka Ibuka from Ohio State, Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yes.
Like, he belongs right there with them. I would say that Xavier Worthy, if he has a breakout year, is another number one wide receiver mentality. There's a kid from Western Kentucky. I'm blanking on his name right now, but he was phenomenal last year with Austin Reed. And Austin Reed is coming back for his 6th season.
Yes.
So, like, having that continuity and that consistency is massive for the Hilltoppers, and it's massive for his stock. So there's still good wide receiver play in next year's draft. There's also really good interior defensive line play in next year's draft. I really, really like Mason Smith's film out of LSU. Mason Smith is going to be a staple, and a lot of people know him as the guy that blocked the guy that nearly blocked the PAT. He got the 4th down stop against Florida State in the that opening
week.
Guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone knows Mason Smith is that guy. Mason Smith was really good at run support last year. Mason Smith was a really talented run stopper. And I think that's kind of the guy that you're looking for to pair opposite of a Malik Collins potentially, or a Sheldon Rankins if he's around for a little while. I don't mind the depth on the defensive line. I do have some questions about the youthfulness of it, but the good news is Sheldon Rankins comes from the New York Jets.
Yes.
The Jets run a very similar defense to what the 49ers did because it was Robert Saleh. You add in Hassan Ridgeway, who is a 1 technique that can kind of play a 0 technique, and can also shade in as a 3 technique. He comes over from San Francisco, so he has the ability of playing in a 2-gap or a 1-gap system. And I think that Malik Collins was your strongest asset to the defensive line last year. So really, you're replacing Roy Lopez, who lost a bucket load of weight going from 2021 to 2022. You're replacing him as now a depth piece versus a starter. And you have 2 guys who have played in both a 1-gap and a 2-gap system underneath the D'Amico Ryans-led defense. It's a weak point because of the age. It's not a weak point because of the skill set.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. That was why I said younger players, the future. And Thomas Booker is the youngest guy there. What was he, a 5th-round pick last year?
He was a 5th-round pick, and there's a role for him.
Okay.
Now, don't get me wrong. He's not a guy that you're going to see start.
Yeah.
But there is a role for him on this defensive line. And when he plays the role, he's actually done a pretty good job in it. I thought cornerback was one position that they did not address very well.
You think they needed to?
My big thing with addressing cornerback is, and I had said for a while, if they kept pick number 33 and they somehow really fell in love with him, would they have called Pittsburgh for Joey Porter Jr.? Because of the thing is, if you don't believe in your pass rushing help, the best way to help out your front 7 is by blanketing receivers downfield. Yep. And they have Steven Nelson going into a contract year at age 30. Okay, well, now he's 30. So everything that you saw after 30 is basically we're potentially moving into safety. And the depth behind those 2 really is interchangeable, but it's not as if, like, you're good, like you're a jack of all trades, master of none is the best way to put it. Yeah. But they did do what they did last year when they didn't address the defensive line, which was they brought in a veteran. And last year the veteran was Jerry Hughes, and he had a breakout season. And Jerry is now not just the leader of that locker room and the old man that is yelling at clouds, but also the old man who's yelling at kids and loves yelling at kids and getting them in line. But they added in Shaquille Griffin from the Jacksonville Jaguars. Yep. And I'm not sure that Shaquille is going to be that great of a player, but I think that his depth purposes gives you that versatility, and it makes you feel a lot more comfortable about where you are as an organization with the depth purposes behind Derek Stingley and Steven Nelson. So, they did address cornerback in a sense.
Yeah, but makes sense. They need to get a little bit younger, depth-wise, in the secondary. That'll be something they can take care of next year. All right, so before I let you go, talk a little bit about any players that we should keep an eye on, whether it's, Brandon Hill, the 7th rounder, who I'm assuming is just going to be potentially a core special teamer. And then you've got any undrafted free agents, including maybe Ali Gay. He's the most notable. Valladay. These are guys that are notable guys, but anybody that we should be keeping an eye on.
Hill's going to be interesting because he's probably only a special teamer, but the way that he was described to me by a scout when he plays this game, it's like when you're playing Madden and you just want to use the hit stick. Like, that's what he does. Like, that's all he does. Okay. It's just like, hey, I'm going to be here making the highlight hit.
Okay.
So this should be a role for him on this team. Toa is the one that I would watch for the most because of this is a guy that was drafted by DeMeco Ryans. And DeMeco Ryans knows linebacker play. Like, DeMeco Ryans not only knows outside linebacker play, but he knows inside linebacker play. He was a defensive SEC Player of the Year as an outside linebacker. And then he was a 2-time Pro Bowler as an inside linebacker in Houston and Philadelphia. So the guy knows inside linebacker play. If he thinks that Toa Toa is the best option for the team, he doesn't give a flying fadoodle about who was drafted where last year or 2 years ago. The best guy is going to play. And so if Toa Toa is that guy, and if Toa Toa can be your number one, either space linebacker or your Mike linebacker and the thumper that goes downhill, he's going to be a guy that I think is very much targeted. I think that Halliday is going to be a really intriguing dude out of Arizona State. The kid played at Wyoming for a couple of years. He was pretty good in the backfield there. Last year at Arizona State, he averaged a team high. I think it was 5.2 yards per play. And this is a run game that, is very predicated on having multiple running backs. That's just kind of a thing. They like having their burly guy, and that would be Dameon Pierce. They like having their change of pace back, which feels like a Devin Singletary. And then you want to have your more versatile playmaker, whether it be a third down guy that you're going to target in the passing game, on swing routes, or on quick post, or quick little outs, or a guy that's going to fight for those hard yards. And Halliday kind of does that. So I wouldn't be shocked to see him make the final 53 roster, especially when you look at the running backs currently here. Yeah. Like it's Mike Boone, it's Dare Ogabalaway. Yeah. I mean, they still need running back help. Sure. And they added Singletary, and that's a huge win, but you still need running back help. So I wouldn't be shocked to see Halliday be one of those guys that we end up panning out. I mean, I really liked last year Colby Harvell-Peel coming out of Oklahoma State, and he probably would have made the at least practice squad, if not for a torn injury they suffered during rookie minicamp, that ended up having to get released.
Yep. It's not easy making the NFL, especially when you're in one of those positions. And then when you get hurt, forget it. That's really hard. Okay, so by the way, last question. Who's the backup tight end? Who's number 2?
Probably Tegan Quintoriano, I would say so right now. This is a guy that came on strong last year. He had 3 touchdowns, 2 of which came in the red zone. So the guy ended up having a nice little niche role. And the biggest thing about him is that he's a blocker. He's a very willing blocker. And this is not a knock on Brevin Jordan, but Brevin Jordan's a receiving tight end.
Sure.
You have the receiving tight end right now in Dalton Schultz. You have your security blanket. You need that guy who's going to be able to be effective in run blocking. And when he was coming out of Oregon State, everyone's talking about Luke Musgraves and what Luke Musgraves brings to the table. And Luke Musgrave is a very, very good tight end, very good receiving tight end. But Tegan Quintoriano was the reason why Oregon State got back on track with its run game 2 years ago. So I think that because of his run blocking skills, he has said multiple times he idolizes George Kittle because of George Kittle was a run blocking tight end first that later turned into a better receiver. He said that he can turn his game around as a receiving aspect versus a running aspect. If you're a good run blocker, that doesn't go away anytime soon. There's always a role for that. I think Quintoriano probably takes over as tight end number 2 for at least this year.
Did you get a chance to go watch the team in person?
I've watched them a couple times. Now, minicamp is not started yet. That'll be the next time we see everyone out there. We've only gotten to see rookie minicamp. Stroud's got an arm. I mean, the accuracy is not going to be a problem for him. That is probably the biggest blessing for Texans fans to hear right now is that as long as he is in rhythm and in sync with the wide receivers, arm strength and accuracy is not going to be a problem.
Cole, appreciate it. Great job as always. Love to learn about what's going on down in Houston. Anytime we talk, we'll be doing this again, of course, sometime before either training camp or the preseason, definitely before the season. The draft review guide, and I'm going to take a lot of what you said and put that into the Houston Texans portion of the draft review guide, which will be out in about a month. So keep that in mind for the viewers. Of course, the draft guide is out. That's still something that you should pick up right now at ourlads.com because now you know where all the players are. I think it's just important now to get it than just before the draft. So it's not too late to get the draft guide at ourlads.com. I don't think it's ever too late before the season starts. So appreciate it as always, Cole. And what do you got working on? I know you're real busy. So what's your schedule like now?
I am about ready to go ahead and rank all Power 5 coaches in college football, which is going to be big for me. So that's a massive project that I'm working on. I'm going to be doing a lot of Big 12 coverage, a lot of SEC coverage coming up. And then naturally I got Texans. Oh, and I had this thing called a wedding That's actually happening in about a month. It's actually a month from today.
Oh,
so
congratulations.
Yeah, so I'm going to be taking about 5 days off to go enjoy not just my nuptials, but also a well-deserved honeymoon with my soon-to-be wife.
That's awesome. Where are you going?
St. Lucia. Naturally, here's the best part, Greg, is that I am a big mountains guy. I love going to the mountains. I think that the mountains are beautiful. Yes. I love the deserts. I'm really into nature atmosphere. Those are my type of vacations. Okay. She is a big beach girl. She loves the beach. She's really much into the water. She loves sitting in the sand, nice margarita in her hand, enjoys all that. So we're going to a beach for our honeymoon. I didn't win that battle, naturally. So I mean, it's just like the start of, hey, this is welcome to your life, buddy. Welcome to the rest of your life, buddy.
Well, it's not a bad trade-off, though.
She's pretty, so I guess that's
you sucker.
She likes me for me, which is very challenging.
Yeah, there you go. No wonder why you married her. There you go. Didn't want to lose her.
Nah.
All right, Cole. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you in a few months, and when we do, you'll be a happily married bachelor.
I'll be a happily married man, no longer bachelor.
Not bachelor. What's the term? No, wait. What is it? It's newlywed. Newlywed. That's the term. Not bachelor, idiot. All right. Thanks, Cole. Enjoy.
Appreciate it, Greg.
Take care.